This morning I am in Omaha, Nebraska at Creighton University and talking with our colleague L Andrus, who is Professor of Law and Director of the Law Library here at Creighton. Kay, it is our custom to begin by finding out a little bit about you as a regular person as opposed to just a colleague, since we have lives on the outside as well as on the inside of the profession. You should tell us a little bit about your life, perhaps not only today, but even when you were younger.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for this invitation to participate in this oral history project. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful idea. I was born in southeast Idaho, a little town called Yukon, U-C-O-N. Mm-hmm. Come from a loving family, 9 children. I'm number 6 out of 9, so 5 boys and 4 girls, and had a wonderful boyhood, really, on a family farm. Mm-hmm. My father was a school principal in another district, thankfully.
So you didn't have him overseeing your classes?
Not directly, but I have an idea. He had a pretty good idea from his colleagues in the area.
Parents have a way of monitoring their children when they're in school more than the children realize.
I'm with you, though I did have an advantage. Being number 6, I think my parents, if they weren't tired, they'd seen many of the shenanigans from my older siblings, so they probably cut me a little more slack. But it was a wonderful boyhood, really, on the family farm, and of course milked a lot of cows and sloughed hogs and those things that you read about in old storybooks. But it really was part of my life, and it was I feel very blessed for that, to have that background. It helps me to this day. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, my mother, wonderful woman who wouldn't be able to raise 9 children, but she went. Where I'm headed is about the importance of education in my home. Mm-hmm. I remember fondly having her read me stories before bedtime. My younger sister and myself, in particular, and anyone else that would gather around the mom's chair in the living room. And libraries became important to me at an early age, as did just the importance of books. And books were our friends, and I had my own corner and collection. And so from an early age, the printed word in education mattered a lot to me. My father got a master's degree in education at a later age, after his children were growing, so he had to commute to Utah State University to do that, and my mother actually finished her bachelor's degree at age 63, which was my age now, so I admire how what a premium they placed on education, and that mattered to me, still does to this day. Beyond that, I have had a wonderful career, and family's been very important to me. And I'm headed to the next question. I can't recall. Sorry.
Well, the next question is actually, do you have any particular passions or hobbies or other special interests? And I know from before we went on camera that you do.
I do. I have several. Other than gardening, which is a passion of mine, I like to get my hands in the dirt, and it's a good way to unwind and the like, and keep up a half-acre yard and the like. I collect quotations on my smartphone. I have about 7,000 quotations that are meaningful to me, and then I have a rather unusual hobby of collecting tavern puzzles. Now, not everyone knows what a tavern puzzle is, but they'll endure for a long time. I've got one here.
Well, we rehearsed this part. I'm going to stand by the camera so that I can make sure where you hold it will be on screen. And because this is a normal live sort of thing, I won't clip this part out either.
Well, fair enough. This is...
hold it in a little bit towards your face. Perfect, and a little higher. And that looks beautiful, right on screen.
Fair enough. This is a beginner's tavern puzzle. It's called Iron Heart, for obvious reasons. And you really haven't solved the puzzle unless you take it apart and put it back together. But they come in various difficulties. I obviously brought a simple one for this demonstration, but nearly as easy as taking the heart off and putting it back on. It's great for my grandchildren. Part of what I'm passionate about, Pat, is my 5 grandchildren, and I am blessed with a loving wife and a nice tradition of family gatherings and the like. So that's very important to me.
Are the grandchildren all in this general area, Omaha, or
Well,
you have to travel to see them?
I do need to travel at this point. Fortunately, for a 3-year period of time, 4 of my grandchildren did live here in Omaha.
Uh-huh.
And recently there was a job opportunity for their father, and they moved west. So it's about a 1,000-mile trip to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy and I saw them on Labor Day, and we're going to join them for Thanksgiving. My second daughter and her daughter and husband are coming for the gathering at Thanksgiving. We're
Are
very
they
grateful.
anywhere near Idaho by any chance?
Well,
It's about 1,000 miles.
Actually, they're closer to where you came from. They're from Puyallup, Washington.
Oh, that's almost a suburb of Seattle, just like Olympia,
Yes.
sort of a distant one. But
There we go. So she's a music teacher,
Uh-huh.
and her husband Adam works there as an IT person. We like to gather at least 2-3 times a year if we can. So I'm passionate about family.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree fully. I have 2 grandsons and one with each of my 2 kids, and it's wonderful to have that, I think. I got a little follow-up, which we did not rehearse. It's not in the script, and that is that tavern puzzle looked like it might be a way to tell if you've had enough to drink. So if you couldn't do it, the bartender would say you're through for the night.
It may well have been. I don't know the tradition, but about 25 of them of various difficulties, and there's one that I've not been able to solve called Sneaky Pete. I actually don't let anybody else play with it. I'm afraid they're going to solve it, but beyond that one,
Beat you to it?
That's right. Maybe
Oh,
at some
well.
stage in the future.
Once you get it mastered, then you see, one of these days you'll be retiring, and your retirement project,
There
one
we
of them
go.
will be to figure that thing out.
That will be it. Yes.
Yes.
Hopefully, I can get it
I
done.
mean, since every morning will be Saturday morning, you'll have plenty of time.
Sure.
In theory. Well, getting a little more serious and back on track and back on what we would talk about, I know you have 3 degrees. Kay, could you tell us what they are and where you got each?
Okay. Actually, my degrees, master in library science and law degree, both were from Brigham Young University in 1980. And I've had questions over the years. Well, how could you get your library degree and law degree at the same time? And there is a brief story regarding that. I started law school 1977 and really fell in love with the library in law school again, which seems curious, but it was nonetheless a fact. The whole West Key number system kind of was an interesting organizational tool to me, and so I was at BYU at the time, the 5th graduating class for the law school there, but I started to think to myself, this might be a career option that matches my own outlook of what I'd like to do with my life a little better. I fortunately visited with some good folks there at BYU. They had a library school at BYU at the time.
Yes.
And I was able to, with the help of David Thomas and my dean and the dean of the library school, work out a program where I could go to library school classes in conjunction with law classes in summer and the like, and actually completed both the master's and the JD in a 3-year period of time.
I have talked to at least 1 or 2 others in these series who had the same experience of sort of overlapping the 2 degrees at BYU. And I remember visiting the campus a couple of years ago, and it's really a beautiful location. And right off the edge of the campus seems to be the beginning of the Rocky Mountains.
It
There's
does,
a great big slope going up.
No, the mountains come right down to campus. It's a beautiful spot.
It really is. Well, I noticed you got your degrees, and preparing for today's conversation, I noted that your first job out of library school and law school, since it was sort of together, was as assistant law librarian at Oklahoma City University School of Law. I suppose in more modern jargon, you'd be the associate director in today's use of terms. But could you tell us about that? You were there, I think, about a year, one academic
Yeah,
year
a
or
year,
so.
year, 2.5, a year to a year and one half.
Mhm.
Oklahoma City, my brother lived there at the time. That was
Mm.
one of the reasons we took the job. And the director, Bill Byntum, a wonderful man. He helped recruit me there, and I learned a great deal. In retrospect, I learned a good deal more at OCU, as they called it, than I thought I did at the time.
Mhm.
It was unfortunate for Bill, but shortly after I arrived, there was a death in the family that caused him to have to leave the campus for nearly a month and a half.
Oh,
And here I was, a young,
so you were the
cynical,
inexperienced associate director, but
Yes.
guess what?
but with the help of wonderful staff members and the secretary, was thrust into being in charge, and I learned how to at least approach dealing with vendors and some faculty and taking care of some billing decisions. Certainly there were phone calls from Bill back and forth,
Sure.
so I can't pretend to say that I was in charge, but I I saw a lot of the big decisions in libraries close up at an early time in my career.
That sounds like a wonderful experience. I mean,
Yeah,
given
it
the
was.
circumstances, it was unfortunate, but still, it's wonderful. Take advantage of it if you have to.
Yeah, it was, and so I learned a good deal, and of course I was anxious and really wanting to advance in my career, and we had an opportunity about a year and a half later to move to Dallas, not far from Oklahoma City,
Mhm.
and worked at SMU at that point for 3 years. Earl Borgeson was the director there. I consider him to be one of my mentors. He was a very good man, nearing the end of his career, really. And I recall one conversation. Earl was very good to take each staff member out to lunch every month or so. And he said, "Kay, at some point you're going to be a library director. I have no doubt in it. But having said that, I want you to know that it's about people. I've been at Harvard, I've been at Stanford, I've been at LA County, and collections are great and buildings are great, but what really matters at the end of the day is people." And I've thought at the time, well, okay, I hear what you're saying, but the more I've gone into my career, the more profound I think that counsel was.
Well, Earl, of course, I had the advantage of getting to know him when I was still in library school, because we had a 4-week directed fieldwork experience, and did mine at Harvard, even though I was from the West Coast. And Earl was the director still there, and he was such a wonderful person. I remember about 2 days before the end of my field work, and I finished the projects that he'd given me and so on, he said to me, "I have another assignment for you, Pat." And I paused and wondered, well, what will it be? And he said, "My son's coming by, one of his sons, and you're all going to go to the ball game opening day
Wow,
at
there you
Fenway
go.
Park." So it was a lot of fun.
Well, that kind of aligns. Earl loved to reserve block seats for any staff member who wished to go at the SMU football games, and he was there at the
Somehow,
stadium the Cowboys
given my
played.
experience with him, that doesn't surprise me one bit.
And so we had many good times together.
Now, you had some others that you count as mentors, I understand.
Well, I really do. Of course, looking back on it, and we remained friends and, over the years. Bill Byntum got me started. David Thomas at BYU, before I left, I should mention his name, as well as Heinz Peter Mueller. Both of them encouraged my fledgling attempts to become a law librarian while I was a student assistant at the reference desk of BYU, and they really gave me support and encouragement to go to library school and accomplish this. I wouldn't have been able to get both degrees simultaneously without their help, so I would like to acknowledge them. Beyond that, really, I count many mentors later on. Frank Hudak at SIU was very, very high performance kind of man,
Yeah.
and he guided me a good deal as well.
Frank is one of my colleagues with whom I collaborate on this oral history, the other being Michelle Wu at Georgetown, and it was wonderful working with the two of them. And of course, Frank and I were back to back in the association leadership
Oh, yes, I
about 20
remember.
years ago, and it was a good arrangement. That's when I really got to know him, and as a real person. And yeah, I'd known him, but like one knows colleagues, but I really got to know him then. And
Sure. Well, a fellow
Really.
with great organization, really, and follow
Very
through.
much.
And
Yeah.
I learned a good deal about how to organize my time and meetings and the like from his effectiveness.
Mhm. Well, with so that sort of all said about mentors and so on, let's move back into your career itself. You were at Oklahoma City University for about a year, and then in 1981 moved to Dallas and SMU. You've already mentioned Earl and some of that. Could you flesh out a little more, perhaps, at what you did at SMU and
Sure.
what you've learned, other
Well,
than what you've already told us
Of
that Earl
course,
taught
no,
you?
no, I think my title was officially a senior reference librarian
Mm-hmm.
at SMU, and this was a place where I had really intense reference work. It was pre-web, of course. Even the PC was a fledgling kind of creature at that point. I
Yeah.
remember bringing Westlaw into the SMU law library.
That's just about when it really got started.
Yes.
Lexus wasn't much ahead of it.
Well, and Lexus was there, but of course, very big, desk-like machines, and both of these systems, they loaded in 300 baud in one line at a time on the screen. So there was a good deal of computer-assisted legal research instruction from those two systems in particular, but the phone reference was very intense there from Dallas law firms, and there was also a good deal of faculty support. Also had another person, I probably should list her, if not a mentor, a colleague that has influenced my career, Sally Wise at the time. We were colleagues there, and she was my immediate supervisor, and Sally encouraged my career. We did some teaching, taught, I remember, some administrative research together, and helped with some of the legal research and writing program in its development in that area. Beyond that, too, she and I started to publish a bibliography together. The Journal of Air Law and Commerce. We published an aerospace law bibliography for many years together, kind of co-authors, and that was very fine work with her.
Yeah. I like to always pitch some of the other parts of this history, and Sally's story is another part of the oral history,
Yes,
as is Frank Hodek's, for that matter.
sure.
Yeah, he became your next boss.
He
Because
did.
you left Dallas and moved to Carbondale, Illinois.
I did actually, and I was happy at SMU. But
Uh-huh.
one of the good things about Earl Borgeson is he tried to push people out of the nest a bit, and
Yeah.
he said, "I'd love to have you stay, but it might be time for you to look for another job."
Because Earl was looking for your best interest as well as...
He really was. And Sally was very supportive as well. And Liz Kelly was the director at the time, and was the one who hired me on at Southern Illinois,
Yeah.
Carbondale. And I was the head of reader services there. It was the place where I felt very much at home in terms of the environment. It was more like my boyhood area, where Dallas was a big city. We were able to get our first home there, and my children were growing. We loved the area.
Yeah.
It was terrific. But at SIU, I was also able to do some teaching, and that was very helpful too. I was actually on the committee that the search committee for the next law library director, and Frank knows something of it, but I had some influence, I think, in having him hire on as the director of
He
SIU.
must have made a good choice, because he stayed there for the rest of his career. He
Yes,
actually
he
moved
has.
up at one point to acting dean
Yes, he
at the
did.
school, and he was associate dean for faculty. In other words, in charge of herding the cats
Yes.
for a while.
It's amazing how interrelated our lives can become, but
Yeah.
a good friend, and certainly he was a great choice for the directorship of that library, and
Mhm.
has made a wonderful career there, though I think he still considers himself a Californian of sorts.
Well, he sort of, I think, does have an affiliation of, out in L.A. It's called family and other
There we
friends.
go. And he's a Dodgers fan, as I recall.
Well, he's a very avid baseball fan. In
Yeah.
fact, he and Ed Edmonds are
Oh, there they
collaborating in their retirement on some writing on baseball, and
Why not?
having a grand time, I suspect, both of them.
Sure.
Oh, why not? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Well, you were there for a while. You taught a while, learned a few things, but in 1987 or so, you moved again, and this time back to the big city, this time Chicago, and Northwestern University School of Law Library, where you became the associate director for about 3 years. And you
I
want to
did.
tell us about
Well,
that experience and being back in the big city, but a bit colder one than Dallas?
That's right. Well, it was a good move. Stayed in, to the Chicagoland area. And in fact, one of the things and the real blessings of my career is our family has enjoyed it everywhere we've lived, though obviously being here in Omaha since 1990, which I know we'll get to, this feels like home now. I did have a career goal from early on, or at least from the SMU days, to become a director, and I knew that I would need to put myself in a situation where being an associate was a better stepping stone to becoming a law library director than where I was at SIU. Frank was a young man and just hired on, and while I was very happy there, this was an opportunity at Northwestern. One of the 20
premier
schools.
place, yes.
Yeah, it really was. As they sometimes said behind the scenes there, well, we're one of the 20 schools that thinks we're in the top 10. So, and they may have changed their view about that, but a wonderful school.
Well, they may be one of the top 20 that is in the top 10, actually.
And it is, yes, it was a great experience there. And we, George Grossman was the director there, and I learned a good deal from George too. He was also an organized man, but had a little different view than some of the other directors that I had, but certainly somebody who was supportive of my career. I didn't have teaching in the classroom at Northwestern, which is something that I had grown to really enjoy at SIU. But some wonderful staff members there, high-powered faculty research support, some very good work with Chicago area law librarians beyond Northwestern, and I remember helping to set up a messenger service and other doing some other work in Chicago. So it was a great place to be.
Well, George now resides in Portland, Oregon.
Oh.
Yeah, he's come up in a couple of steps from Davis, which was his last position.
Sure, I
He
knew
was
that, but I
director
lost
there.
track.
He had retired, and he moved to Ashland, Oregon for a while, which is in the very south part of
Wow.
Western Oregon, and now he's up at the north part in Portland.
I see.
Yeah.
And I thought that he was in San Francisco area, so
Yeah.
good. That's a nice update for me.
Not far from Puyallup, if you're ever out there. and
Yes,
wanna-
I should connect with him again.
Yeah, he lives right on the Willamette River in a retirement community, and I had the pleasure of visiting him not too long ago. It was a lot of fun to talk with him.
Well, he read very, very deeply and thought deeply about law librarianship and legal education
Yeah.
in general.
Well, he has agreed to go on camera for our
Well,
history,
good.
and I've
He
got to
should
get
be
down there. It's a reason to go, and
Well, he should be there.
pin him down to a time and do it.
I'm glad that he will, because not only at Northwestern, but at I think Minnesota and Utah were his predecessor schools. So George has a lot to contribute.
Yeah, he was around at some interesting places during his career, but most of it was at the end in California at Davis.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, you have been here now for 26 years. That's a career by itself. Great,
It is.
and you on the faculty. You teach and run the library as much as the director really does. We really know who runs it. It's everybody else.
There we go.
But you want to talk a little more about your experiences here in Omaha at Creighton?
Sure. Well, and I do want to acknowledge the efforts of George Grossman was helpful in my getting this position, and I came with the intention of being here probably 5 years and have had opportunities to move on. But whenever I took a real close look, I decided that
So you settled in. They treated you
Creighton was a
decently,
very
and
good
here
thing.
you are.
Yes, and the Jesuit law school and legal education tradition aligns well with a lot of my values, and this has just been a wonderful place to stay. I've had an opportunity to not only participate in the legal research and writing instruction over the years and really develop program and hire people and the like. We also got engaged in some publication of my own, though I'd done some of that earlier, but the Research Guide to Nebraska Law, we went through 5 or 6 editions of that. This was a free actually booklet that was issued alongside the Mickey and then Lexis publishing statutes. And of course, after 2008, even though the editor said that it was a very fine publication, they were moving more to the web, and they encouraged us to not put it out in print anymore. So that ceased, but I had some very good publication experience that we received considerable feedback on that was favorable in putting those publications together. And now a good deal of that content has been moved to LibGuide in other ways, but that was a good experience. Got to be a member of the faculty here, attend faculty meetings. Certainly my children and wife, she has a job nearby here at Central High School, just a stone's throw away, if you will. So Omaha feels like home now. And
Well, after 26 years or so, I would hope so.
yes, and it's a flyover country here in Nebraska to a lot of people, but I often say, Warren Buffett, he could afford to live nearly anywhere, and he still stays here. There must be something good about the city.
Now, in approaching the university this morning, I came off of the interstate, and I saw the big sign on a building in the distance, Boys Town, and boy, that brought back memories. I mean, that was a charity that my parents encouraged, supported back in the 50s, and I met somebody recently in Seattle who was an orphan, and he was placed in a foster home at about the time he was going to otherwise age out of the orphanage he was in Seattle at the time, and he would have been sent to Boys Town, he said. But he didn't ever come there. So it was just a chance. I happened to run into him a few weeks ago in Seattle, and a group together, and he was in the group for lunch. It was a lot of fun.
Sure. Well, I drive by Boys Town campus every day.
Yeah.
My
Well, I
home
knew
was just
it
the
was
other side.
somewhere around here, but now I know where.
Well, about 13 miles west. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Well, you have served our profession in a variety of ways. You were president at one time of the Mid-America Association of Law Libraries, which is a chapter of the ALL. And you want to talk a little bit about that service?
Sure.
And perhaps other things you've done for the profession generally, including perhaps other organizations besides the ALL.
Thank you, Pat. No, I think that professional service matters. I've always felt that way. I think I get some of that from not only Earl Borgeson, but Frank Hodig, both of whom were presidents, as you were, of the association. But most of my service has been at the local level, and I've been chair of the local arrangements committee of 2 of the meetings here in Omaha that we hosted in Mid-America.
Kept you rather busy.
Yeah, once in 2007
Wow.
and more recently in 2013. But being president was also a good experience in terms of making sure the committee appointments occurred and the program was in place and the budget and the like. So But probably I've had more enjoyment in my professional development work, just being certain that the staff members here, we're 50 miles from the closest law library at UNL. We need to get out and to attend the national and the regional meetings. And when I hired on here at Creighton, one of the commitments that I was able to get from the administration at the time, and I've just carried it forward, was, there would be money for professional development. We would be able to send myself and the professional staff to at least to these 2 meetings every year if they wish to go.
That's very important. I always felt, in my early part of my career, it was often just the director or law librarian was the usual title then, who went to, say, the national meeting. The local ones or the regional ones were for the director plus others. But that changed, and more of us were able to
Yes.
go to annual meetings of
Well, and to
associations.
Creighton's credit, they've supported me over the years in that, in living up to that promise. And I think that it's helped not only myself, but people I care a great deal about and on staff spread their wings and become more involved and more knowledgeable, better librarians themselves as a result.
It must also be easily perceived as a recognition of their worth to you as director and to the library. And
I hope so.
I would think it would come across somewhat that way. I always hoped it did with my own
Sure.
subordinates.
Yes.
You know. And they were always good to me, so that makes or breaks the head guy,
That's
or the
right.
head person, I guess.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Well, we're sort of getting close, perhaps, to the end of our conversation this morning, Kay, but before we do, it's customary to ask if there's anything that we've not talked about that you might want to bring up.
Well, thank you. The one thing that occurs to me is that if I could have selected from afar, and of course the last chapter isn't written here, but if I were to be having this conversation 100 years hence, I was blessed to, and have been blessed to be in this profession, a great profession, during some of the most interesting times that I could have chosen. In 1980, just the introduction of the PC, saw the development of that through the mainframe and the networked era. The web really hit its stride about 1996, and was able to see the transition of legal research tools from the print to the electronic and various iterations of that. So I've been very, very fortunate in this career to never have a boring day, and there's been a lot of change.
Yeah.
And I've tried very hard to keep a foot both in print and electronic camps and to embrace change rather than totally resist it. And however, I've known that while Creighton, we have a very good law school here, I didn't have enough money to be what I would call a first-generation revolutionary. I had to be careful with the budget to hold back just enough to make sure that any of the decisions I made with the budget would get long-term use.
In other words, you couldn't afford to make mistakes.
Well, I really didn't feel like I could, though.
Yeah.
I have made some, but I would like to say that
That's what we never tell our guys. That.
they were overcomable and not huge ones. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way, at least in my view. So, if I could have chosen a time to be a law librarian, I really believe that I had a great time. Now, that's to say nothing about the future, because I'm sure that there are wonderful years ahead in law librarianship. I'm confident of that, and it will just be different. And I hope that my successors, 20, 30 years hence, feel the same way about their career as I have, as I do about mine. Because things evolve, things change, but I am delighted for a happy life and a happy family and a wonderful community. And I'm grateful that you took time to have this conversation with me this morning.
Well, this is a huge pleasure on my part to meet up with you again, Kay, after some years of not being able to see each other at meetings because I wasn't able to go. And anybody that watches very many of these will realize that nobody needs to thank me for it. I'm having far too much fun doing them, having a great
I'm glad
time.
you are.
Thank you. Well, I think perhaps on that basis, I should thank you for being part of today's conversation, Kay Andrus, and in welcoming me here to the university and the law library and giving me the Cook's tour, and earlier helping me get into the parking lot because somebody put the gate down to keep trespassers out like myself. And so it worked out well. And on thanking you, I'm not just thanking you on my behalf, but I'm also thanking you on behalf of my colleagues, Michelle Wu, Frank Kodak, and of course Dick Spinelli, with whom I have the pleasure of working to put together this oral history of law librarianship for Hein Online. Thank you.
Thank you very much.